Marcus had always believed that small acts of kindness could change lives, but he never imagined how true this would become on a cold Tuesday evening in downtown Chicago. As he walked past the old diner on Maple Street, something caught his attention through the foggy window. Inside, he saw a man sitting alone at a corner table, his head buried in his hands while 3 young children sat quietly around him, sharing a single plate of fries. The man looked exhausted, his clothes wrinkled and his shoulders heavy with what seemed like the weight of the world. The children, probably between ages 5 and 10, sat unusually still for kids their age. They took turns eating the fries slowly, as if trying to make them last as long as possible. The oldest child, a girl with pigtails, kept glancing at her father with worried eyes while gently patting his arm. Marcus felt his heart tighten as he watched this scene unfold. He had been having a good month at his small construction business, and seeing this family struggle reminded him of his own difficult childhood. His father had worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table, and Marcus remembered many nights when dinner was nothing more than bread and whatever his mother could find in the cupboards. Without hesitation, Marcus pushed open the diner door, the small bell chiming above his head. The warm air hit his face as he approached the family's table. The man looked up, his eyes red and tired, clearly embarrassed that someone might have noticed their situation. His name tag read David and had a small coffee cup logo next to it. "Excuse me," Marcus said gently, pulling out the chair across from David. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but are you okay? You look like you could use someone to talk to." The children stopped eating and stared at Marcus with curious eyes, while David shifted uncomfortably in his seat. David hesitated for a moment, looking around the nearly empty diner before meeting Marcus's kind eyes. "It's been a rough few weeks," he admitted quietly, glancing at his children. "Lost my job at the coffee plant last month, and things have been difficult." His voice cracked slightly as he spoke, and Marcus could see the man was fighting back tears. The oldest child, the girl with pigtails, spoke up. "Daddy says we're going on an adventure," she said with forced cheerfulness. "We're staying in our car now because it's like camping." Marcus's heart broke a little more as he realized this family was homeless, and the father was trying to protect his children from the harsh reality of their situation. Marcus looked at the 3 innocent faces staring back at him and made a decision that would change all of their lives forever. He reached into his wallet and placed a $20 bill on the table. "Why don't we get these kids a proper meal?" he said to David, "and maybe you and I can figure out how to turn this adventure into something even better." David's eyes filled with tears as he looked at the money, then at Marcus. "I can't accept charity," he said quietly, his pride still intact despite his desperate circumstances. "I'm not that kind of man. I work for what I get." Marcus could see the internal struggle playing out on David's face, the need to provide for his children, warring with his dignity and self-respect. "This isn't charity," Marcus replied firmly. "This is one father helping another, and maybe, if you're willing to listen, I might have something that could help you get back on your feet. But first, let's make sure these beautiful children get some real food in their stomachs." The youngest child, a boy who couldn't have been more than 5, smiled for the first time since Marcus had been watching them. As the waitress brought over hamburgers, chicken nuggets, and milkshakes for the children, David finally began to open up to Marcus. The kids dove into their food with an enthusiasm that broke both men's hearts, making it clear they hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. David explained that he had worked at the coffee processing plant for 8 years before the company decided to automate most of their operations. "I was a floor supervisor," David said, watching his children eat. "Good at my job, never missed a day unless one of the kids was sick. Then one Friday, they called us all into a meeting and told us that half the workforce was being let go. Just like that, 8 years down the drain." He stirred his coffee absently, the steam rising between them like a barrier he was trying to cross. Marcus listened intently as David continued his story. The unemployment benefits had run out after 6 months, and David had burned through his small savings trying to keep their apartment. He had applied for dozens of jobs, but most required skills he didn't have or paid so little that he couldn't afford both childcare and rent. The children's mother had left when the youngest was just 2 years old, leaving David to raise them alone. The hardest part, David admitted, is watching them pretend everything is okay. Kids shouldn't have to worry about where they're going to sleep or when they'll eat next. That's supposed to be my job. His hands trembled slightly as he spoke, the weight of his responsibility as a single father evident in every word. Marcus had been thinking while David talked, and an idea was forming in his mind. His construction business had been growing steadily, and he had been considering hiring additional help for an upcoming project. But more than that, he saw something in David that reminded him of his own father, a man who had never given up no matter how hard things got. "What kind of work are you willing to do?" Marcus asked directly. "I mean any kind of work. I'm not talking about your dream job or something in your field. I'm talking about honest work that pays decent money." David looked up sharply, hope flickering in his tired eyes for the first time that evening. David straightened in his chair. "Anything," he said without hesitation. "I'm not afraid of hard work. I can learn whatever you need me to learn. I just need a chance to prove myself." The desperation in his voice was clear, but so was his determination. Marcus could see the man David used to be underneath the exhaustion and worry. "I run a small construction company," Marcus explained. "We do residential renovations, small commercial jobs, nothing too fancy. I've got a big project starting next week, renovating an old apartment building. It's going to take at least 3 months, maybe 4. I need someone reliable, someone who shows up every day and isn't afraid to get their hands dirty." The children had finished eating and were now listening to the conversation with growing excitement. The oldest girl tugged on her father's sleeve. "Daddy, does this mean we can have a real home again?" she whispered loud enough for Marcus to hear. David's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they seemed different, hopeful rather than desperate. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "The job starts Monday at 7 in the morning. It's hard work, but it pays $15 an hour to start, with the possibility of more if you prove yourself. And David?" He paused, making sure he had the man's full attention. "I'm also going to need someone I can trust to eventually supervise some of the newer guys. Someone with management experience." David stared at the card in his hands as if it were made of gold. "I don't know what to say," he whispered. "You don't even know me. How do you know I won't let you down?" It was a fair question, and Marcus could see that David's self-confidence had taken a serious beating over the past few months. Marcus smiled and looked at the 3 children, who were watching their father with hopeful expressions. "Because any man who can keep 3 kids fed, clothed, and optimistic while living in a car is exactly the kind of person I want working for me. That takes more strength and character than most people have." The next morning, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about David and his children. He had given David his address and told him to meet at the construction site, but he was worried about the family's immediate needs. They were still sleeping in their car, and Marcus knew that David would need more than just a job to get back on his feet. He would need help with the basics. Marcus drove to the site early and waited. At exactly 7 o'clock, David appeared, walking quickly down the street. He was wearing the same clothes from the night before, but he had clearly tried to clean up as best as possible. His hair was combed, his face was shaved, and his shoes were polished despite being worn through at the soles. "Where are the kids?" Marcus asked, concerned about their safety and well-being during the day. David explained that his oldest daughter, Emma, was watching the 2 younger ones in the local library during the day. The librarian, Mrs. Rodriguez, had taken pity on them and allowed them to stay as long as they remained quiet and didn't cause any problems. Marcus introduced David to the rest of the crew, 5 men who had worked with him for several years. At first, they were skeptical about the new guy. In construction, trust was earned through sweat and reliability, not through sob stories. But Marcus had explained the situation to them beforehand, and they were willing to give David a chance to prove himself. The work was indeed hard. They were gutting the interior of a 3-story apartment building, removing old plaster, pulling up flooring, and hauling debris. David threw himself into the work with an intensity that impressed everyone. He arrived early, stayed late, and never complained about the dust, heat, or physical demands of the job. By lunchtime, David had earned the respect of the crew. He worked faster than men half his age and showed them tricks he had learned from helping his father with home repairs as a teenager. More importantly, he listened carefully to instructions and asked smart questions that showed he was thinking ahead to the next steps of each task. During their lunch break, Marcus pulled David aside. "How are you holding up?" he asked, noticing that David had only brought a small sandwich while the other workers had full lunches. David tried to play it off, saying he wasn't very hungry, but Marcus could see through the act. That evening, Marcus made another decision that would surprise David. Instead of just paying him for the day's work, Marcus handed him an envelope with enough cash for 3 days' worth of wages. "Consider it an advance," he said when David started to protest. "You can't work effectively if you're worried about your kids or where you're going to sleep tonight." David stared at the envelope, overwhelmed by Marcus's generosity. "I don't understand why you're doing all this for us," he said quietly. "You don't owe us anything. We're strangers." The emotion in his voice was clear, and Marcus could see that David was struggling to accept help after months of being turned away by everyone else. Marcus thought for a moment before answering. "My father used to tell me that we're only as strong as the people we lift up along the way," he said. "When I was 12, we lost our house and a neighbor helped my dad find work. That neighbor didn't have to help us, but he did. It changed our lives. Maybe this is my chance to pass that forward." With the advance money, David was able to rent a small motel room for the week. It wasn't much, just 2 beds and a tiny bathroom, but it was warm, safe, and private. That night, for the first time in weeks, his children were able to take hot showers and sleep in real beds. Emma helped her father tuck in her younger brothers, and they all fell asleep feeling hopeful for the first time in months. Meanwhile, Marcus was at home making phone calls. He had connections throughout the city from years of construction work, and he was determined to help David find permanent housing that his family could afford. He knew that having a stable address would make everything else easier. Finding better schools for the children, opening a bank account, building credit again. The next morning, David arrived at work 30 minutes early. He had used the motel's laundry facilities to wash his clothes, and he looked more like the supervisor he had once been. His confidence was slowly returning, and it showed in the way he carried himself and interacted with the other workers. Marcus watched David work throughout the day and noticed something important. David wasn't just following orders anymore. He was anticipating problems, suggesting improvements, and naturally taking on a leadership role with some of the newer crew members. It was clear that David had real management potential, just as Marcus had hoped. 2 weeks into the job, David had transformed from a desperate man into a valuable team member. His work ethic and natural leadership abilities had not gone unnoticed by the other workers, who now came to him with questions and looked to him for guidance on complex tasks. Marcus was impressed but not surprised. He had seen the potential in David from that first night in the diner. The real breakthrough came when they encountered a serious problem with the building's electrical system. The old wiring was more damaged than expected, and the project was falling behind schedule. David studied the blueprints during his lunch break and approached Marcus with a solution that would save both time and money. His experience managing workflows at the coffee plant had given him skills that perfectly translated to construction project management. "What if we tackle the electrical work in sections while continuing the other renovations?" David suggested, pointing to the blueprints spread across a makeshift table. "We could coordinate with the electricians to work floor by floor, so we don't have to stop everything at once." Marcus listened carefully and realized David was right. It was a smart approach that showed real problem-solving ability. Marcus implemented David's suggestion, and the project got back on track within days. The building owner was so impressed with the efficiency that he praised Marcus's team management, not knowing that the idea had come from his newest employee. That evening, Marcus pulled David aside with news that would change everything. "I've been thinking about expanding the business," Marcus said as they cleaned up the worksite. "I've got 3 more projects lined up for next year, bigger ones. I'm going to need someone to manage the day-to-day operations while I focus on finding new clients and handling the business side." David looked up from coiling electrical wire, not daring to hope what Marcus might be suggesting. Marcus continued, "The position would be assistant project manager, with a salary instead of hourly wages. It comes with health benefits for you and the kids, and there's potential for partnership down the road if things work out." David set down the wire and stared at Marcus, struggling to process what he was hearing. "You're offering me a management position?" David asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Marcus, I've only been here 2 weeks. You barely know me." The disbelief in his voice was understandable. Just 2 weeks earlier, he had been homeless and desperate, and now he was being offered a chance to rebuild his career. Marcus smiled and patted David on the shoulder. "I know enough. You work harder than anyone I've ever hired. You solve problems instead of creating them, and the other guys respect you. Most importantly, you've got something to prove and kids counting on you. That makes you motivated in a way that money alone can't buy." David's eyes filled with tears for what felt like the 100th time since meeting Marcus, but these were tears of gratitude and relief. He thought about his children sleeping safely in their motel room, about Emma's smile when he had bought her new school supplies the previous weekend, about his youngest son asking if they could stay in Chicago forever because he liked it there. The salary Marcus was offering would allow David to rent a real apartment, enroll his children in good schools, and start rebuilding the life they had lost. More than that, it would give him back his dignity and sense of purpose. He had always been a provider, a protector, and a leader. Now he could be those things again. That weekend, David used his first paycheck to put a deposit down on a small 3-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood near good schools. The apartment was on the second floor of an older building, with hardwood floors that needed refinishing and walls that could use fresh paint. But it had big windows that let in lots of light, and the children could each have their own bedroom for the first time in months. Emma cried when she saw her new room, not from sadness, but from joy and relief. She had been so strong through their ordeal, taking care of her younger brothers and never complaining about their circumstances. Now she could finally be a 10-year-old girl again, instead of a substitute mother carrying the weight of her family's survival. The 2 younger boys ran through the empty apartment, their laughter echoing off the walls as they claimed their spaces and made plans for decorating. David stood in the doorway watching them play, finally able to envision a future that extended beyond just surviving each day. That evening, as David tucked his children into sleeping bags on the floor of their new home, he made them a promise. "We're never going to be homeless again," he told them firmly. "And we're going to help other people who are struggling, just like Marcus helped us. When you're older and you meet someone who needs help, I want you to remember this feeling and do what you can to give them hope." The children nodded solemnly, understanding that what had happened to their family was important, and that Marcus was someone very special. Emma asked if they could invite Marcus over for dinner once they had furniture, and David promised they would as soon as possible. 6 months after that life-changing meeting in the diner, David had completely transformed his family's circumstances. As assistant project manager, he was overseeing 2 construction crews and had proven himself invaluable to Marcus's growing business. The apartment building renovation project had finished ahead of schedule and under budget, earning the company several new contracts from impressed clients. David's children were thriving in their new environment. Emma had joined the school choir and was excelling in mathematics. Her confidence restored now that she didn't have to worry about basic needs. The 2 boys had made friends in their neighborhood and were playing on local soccer teams. Most importantly, they were children again, carefree, happy and secure in their father's ability to provide for them. The transformation wasn't just financial. David had regained his sense of self-worth and purpose. He woke up each morning eager to get to work, knowing that he was building something meaningful both professionally and personally. His natural leadership abilities had flourished in the construction environment, and he had developed a reputation for being fair, hard-working, and innovative. Marcus watched David's growth with satisfaction and pride. What had started as a simple act of kindness had evolved into a genuine friendship and business partnership. David brought skills and perspectives that complemented Marcus's own abilities perfectly. Where Marcus was creative and entrepreneurial, David was organized and detail-oriented. Together, they made an excellent team. The success of their partnership hadn't gone unnoticed in the local construction community. Word had spread about the quality of their work and their ability to complete projects efficiently. They were now being approached by larger clients with more prestigious projects, including a contract to renovate a historic downtown office building. During their planning session for the new project, Marcus made an announcement that surprised everyone, including David. "I've been thinking about the future of this company," he said to the assembled crew. "We've grown beyond what I ever imagined possible, and it's time to make it official. David, I'd like to offer you a partnership." Equal shares, equal responsibility, equal rewards. David was stunned. In less than a year, he had gone from sleeping in his car to being offered an equal partnership in a successful business. The other workers cheered and congratulated him, knowing how hard he had worked and how much he deserved this opportunity. David's hands shook as he shook Marcus's hand, sealing the agreement that would change his family's future forever. The partnership brought new challenges and responsibilities, but David embraced them with enthusiasm. He enrolled in evening business classes to better understand the financial and legal aspects of running a company. Marcus mentored him through the complexities of client relations, bidding processes, and long-term business planning. Emma was especially proud of her father's success. She had written a school essay titled My Hero, about how her dad had never given up even when things seemed impossible. The essay won a local contest, and Emma read it aloud at a school assembly, bringing many parents to tears with her honest account of their family's journey from homelessness to stability. The boys, now settled in their routines, barely remembered the difficult times. They took for granted having their own rooms, regular meals, and their father's presence at their soccer games and school events. David was grateful for their resilience and their ability to adapt, but he made sure they understood the value of hard work and helping others. One evening, as David was reviewing blueprints for their latest project, Emma approached him with a serious expression. "Daddy," she said, "I want to do something special for Marcus. He saved our family, but I don't think he realizes how much he changed our lives. What can we do to show him how grateful we are?" David smiled at his daughter's thoughtfulness. They had invited Marcus for dinner several times, and he had become like an uncle to the children. But Emma was right. They had never properly acknowledged the magnitude of his kindness. Together, they began planning something that would surprise Marcus and demonstrate the ripple effects of his generosity. The local newspaper had been following stories of community kindness, and David contacted them about featuring Marcus's story. He wanted people to know that one person's willingness to help could completely change a family's trajectory. The reporter was immediately interested, especially when she learned about the business partnership that had grown from that first meeting. Meanwhile, Marcus continued to be amazed by David's growth and contributions to the business. The historic office building project was their most ambitious undertaking yet, and David's management skills were crucial to its success. His ability to coordinate multiple crews, manage timelines, and maintain quality standards had elevated the company's reputation to a new level. 1 year after their first meeting, Marcus received an unexpected phone call from the local newspaper, asking if he would be available for an interview about community kindness. Confused but curious, he agreed to meet with the reporter at the construction site of their latest project. What he found there would be a moment he would remember for the rest of his life. David had organized a surprise gathering that included not only the newspaper reporter, but also the mayor, several local business leaders, and dozens of community members whose lives had been touched by the ripple effects of Marcus's kindness. The historic office building they had been renovating served as the backdrop for an event that celebrated the power of human compassion. Emma stepped forward with a microphone, her confidence remarkable for an 11-year-old girl addressing a crowd of adults. "A year ago, my dad and my brothers and I were homeless," she began, her clear voice carrying across the construction site. "We were scared, hungry, and didn't know what would happen to us. Then we met Marcus, and everything changed." As Emma continued her speech, describing how Marcus's simple act of buying them dinner had led to a complete transformation of their lives, there wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. She talked about sleeping in real beds, going to school without worrying about where they would live, and watching her father become proud and confident again. The mayor presented Marcus with a community service award, praising him not just for helping one family, but for demonstrating the kind of neighborhood spirit that made their city strong. Local business leaders spoke about how Marcus and David's construction company had become known for quality work and ethical practices, setting an example for other businesses. But the biggest surprise came when David stepped forward with his own announcement. "Marcus gave me more than a job," he said, his voice strong and confident. "He gave me back my dignity, my future, and my children's security. Now it's time for us to pay it forward," David announced. The creation of the Second Chance Foundation, a non-profit organization that would help homeless families transition back to stability through job training, temporary housing assistance, and mentorship. The foundation would be funded by a percentage of the construction company's profits and operated with the same principles that had guided Marcus's help to David: dignity, respect, and the belief that everyone deserves a chance to rebuild their lives. David had spent months planning this surprise, working with lawyers and community organizations to create something meaningful and sustainable. Marcus was overwhelmed by the day's events. He had never expected recognition for what he considered a simple human response to seeing someone in need. But as he looked around at the faces of people whose lives had been touched by this story, employees who felt proud to work for a company with strong values, community members inspired to help their neighbors, and officials committed to supporting similar initiatives, he realized that small acts of kindness could indeed create waves of positive change. The newspaper story about Marcus and David's journey appeared on the front page the following Sunday, accompanied by photos of their family reunion and the construction site ceremony. The article detailed not just the initial help, but the successful business partnership, the children's academic achievements, and the foundation they had created together. Responses poured in from across the country. Other business owners reached out asking for advice on creating similar mentorship programs. Families who had overcome their own challenges shared their stories and offered to volunteer with the foundation. Most importantly, people in desperate situations read the story and found hope that their circumstances could change. 6 months later, the Second Chance Foundation had helped 12 families transition from homelessness to stable housing and employment. David had become a powerful advocate for homeless families, speaking at conferences and working with city officials to develop better support systems. His own experience gave him credibility and compassion that traditional social workers sometimes lacked. Emma, now thriving in middle school, had started a pen pal program connecting homeless children with stable families to provide emotional support and encouragement. Her brothers were active in local youth programs and had learned to see helping others as a normal part of life. Marcus often reflected on how that chance encounter in the diner had changed not just David's family, but his own life as well. The business partnership had allowed him to expand beyond his original dreams, and the friendship with David had enriched his personal life in ways he never expected. Most importantly, he had learned that helping others wasn't just about changing their lives. It was about discovering the best parts of himself. The success story of Marcus and David became a local legend, proof that in a world often focused on individual achievement, the greatest successes come from lifting each other up. Their partnership continued to thrive, their friendship deepened with each passing year, and their foundation helped dozens of families find hope when they needed it most. Years later, when people asked Marcus about the secret to their success, he would always give the same answer: there's no secret. You just have to be willing to see someone else's struggle as an opportunity to make a difference. Everything good that happened after that was just the natural result of treating people with dignity and believing in their potential.